I always thought the system would stay loyal to me. But that night, it spoke in a way I never expected, and what it showed me changed everything. It was almost midnight, the kind of hour where the office feels more like a shadow than a workplace. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but I stayed behind, trying to finish a server patch that should have been simple. My eyes were tired, my coffee was cold, and I kept telling myself, just a few more minutes. Then the first alert popped up. A login under my name. At a time I wasn't typing. From a location inside the building. At first, I thought it was a glitch. A sync delay. Something harmless. But when the second alert showed up, another approval tied to my credentials, I leaned in closer. My heartbeat slowed in that strange, heavy way that only comes when you sense something is very, very wrong. I opened the system logs fully. Line after line. Action after action. All marked as, performed by me. But I hadn't touched any of them. That sinking feeling spread through my chest so fast it almost took my breath. I whispered into the empty room, someone is copying me. The logs didn't lie. Odd timestamps. New device fingerprints. Approvals I never gave. Changes that looked small but could snowball into something big. A pattern. A plan. And each new entry felt like someone slowly pulling the rug from under me. I sat back for a second, rubbing my face. After 12 years of loyalty to this company, late nights, emergency calls, weekends spent fixing other people's mistakes, this was how it started? Quietly. Secretly. In the dark. The building suddenly felt colder. The next morning, I walked into the office and immediately noticed the difference. A few coworkers looked away quickly when I passed. 2 others whispered, then pretended they weren't talking about anything at all. Normally, people greeted me, asked for help, cracked jokes. But today, something had shifted. When I reached my desk, my supervisor, Mark, appeared beside me with that fake friendly smile he always used when bad news was coming. "Hey," he said lightly, "can we have a quick meeting later today?" His tone said, quick, but his eyes said, serious. And in that moment, everything clicked. The false approvals. The copied credentials. The whispers. The sudden distance from people who used to trust me. They were preparing something. Something fast. Something quiet. And I was in the way. I nodded slowly. Sure. Just let me finish up some checks. But I wasn't checking the servers anymore. I was checking them. I opened the logs again, going deeper than anyone else knew how. I traced unusual logins back to their internal routes. I flagged my clone token. I mapped the suspicious timestamps. Each click felt like peeling back another layer of a secret someone thought they'd buried. My frustration shifted into something sharper, focus. If they wanted to move against me, they should have remembered one thing: I knew this system better than anyone. Hours passed quietly. I let everyone think I was working normally, but I was gathering proof, slowly, carefully, the way you gather pieces of a puzzle no one wants you to complete. Then, near the end of the day, I found it. A hidden internal chat channel buried under a generic label, something the average user would never notice. But the system logs didn't hide it from me. The channel name stopped me cold. Transition plan. My name appeared right under it, tagged in several messages. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the screen as the truth settled in: they weren't just copying me. They weren't just setting me up. They were already planning my replacement. And they thought I'd never see it. But I did. And whatever their plan was, they had no idea I was about to rewrite the entire story. I thought the shock from that first night would fade by morning, but it only grew heavier. Because the more I looked, the more the system revealed, and none of it was good. After finding that hidden channel, transition plan, I couldn't stop myself. I needed answers. I needed to understand how deep this went. So I sat at my desk with my headphones on, pretending to work like nothing was wrong, while inside I was breaking apart piece by piece. I opened the archived logs again, deeper this time. Most people don't even know the system keeps certain backups. But I built this place's network years ago. I knew its secrets better than anyone. And when I ran a trace on the cloned credentials pretending to be me, 2 names appeared on the report. 2 junior employees. Both fresh out of school. Both people I trained myself. Seeing their names hit harder than I expected. They used to come to me for help, used to thank me for teaching them things their college classes skipped. They once called me the guy who keeps the place alive. And now, they were helping push me out. I kept digging, my chest tight. The more messages I uncovered, the more betrayal I felt. One message read, "He's too tired to notice anything. Perfect timing." Another, "Once he's gone, we can split his workload and save the team budget." Then the worst one, "Let's move before he catches on. He won't question it." I had to stop myself from slamming my keyboard. Tired? Sure. Overworked? Definitely. But unaware. They clearly didn't know me at all. As I scrolled through more conversation threads, things got darker. The juniors weren't acting alone. Their messages kept mentioning someone else, someone higher. My supervisor. And not just him. A few names from upper management showed up too. Their tone was cautious but clear enough, they wanted a cheaper department. And removing me, quietly, was their shortcut. I found draft documents for temporary role adjustment. A half-written exit plan. A proposed budget sheet showing my removal as a cost reduction. They were planning my exit before I even knew something was wrong. And I had given this company 12 years of my life. 12 years of late nights. 12 years of answering emergency calls at 3 a.m. 12 years of fixing problems no one else even understood. I remembered all the times I stayed when everyone else left. All the birthdays I missed. All the holidays interrupted by system failures. I had always been the dependable one. And now they wanted me gone because it made their numbers look better. My hands shook, not from fear, but from betrayal so deep it felt personal. Because it was personal. But even through the hurt, something else started to rise inside me. A slow, steady burn. Not rage, not yet. Just a very clear realization that they thought they could outsmart me in a system I designed with my own hands. I leaned back in my chair and took a long breath. People walked past me laughing, talking about lunch, having no idea that the ground beneath this whole department was about to shift. I wasn't planning revenge yet. I was planning truth. And the truth has a way of bringing everything into the light, especially when the evidence is etched into system logs no one can erase. I closed out of the last file, my heart pounding with something sharper than fear. A kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. Then, quietly, under my breath, I whispered a promise to myself, they think they know this system, but I built it. And that was the moment everything inside me changed. I walked into the conference room already knowing what the meeting was really about. But the moment I saw my boss's smile, too wide, too bright, I felt the tension settle in my chest. "Hey," he said, acting like we were old friends catching up. "Thanks for coming in on short notice." His voice was warm, but his eyes, they were calculating. Watching me. Measuring my reactions. I sat down slowly. "Sure," I said. "What's going on?" He sighed, the kind of sigh people use when they're pretending to care. "Well," he began, folding his hands like he was delivering bad news gently, "we've noticed a few irregular approvals under your account. Nothing huge, but enough to raise concern." I kept my expression still, almost neutral. Inside, I felt a spark of anger, but I didn't let it show. He continued, "Look, I know you've been carrying a heavy load. You've been working long hours. Maybe too long. And sometimes, when someone is stretched thin, things slip through. He leaned forward. It happens to the best of us. Every word felt rehearsed. Gentle tone. Soft blame. Hidden motives. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about covering his plan. So, he said carefully, I think it might be best if you stepped back for a bit. Take some time. Let us review things and make sure everything lines up. There it was. The push. The first official move to replace me. For a second, the room felt smaller. The walls felt closer. It was surreal hearing someone talk to me like I didn't know the truth, like I hadn't spent the last 2 days uncovering every secret they tried to hide. But I kept my voice calm. Controlled. Patient. Interesting, I said softly. Irregular approvals. His smile wavered just a bit. Yes, he said. Just a few things out of the ordinary. I nodded slowly, then leaned back in the chair. You might want to recheck the logs, I said. My tone was polite, almost casual, but the message underneath was sharp. His eyebrows twitched. He blinked twice. What do you mean? You'll see, I replied. Just make sure you check all of them. For the first time in the entire conversation, his confidence cracked. He looked down at his tablet. Then back at me. Then away again. That nervous shift told me everything. He knew something wasn't lining up. He knew I wasn't as clueless as he hoped. But I didn't push him. Not yet. Revenge, real revenge, isn't rushed. It's steady. Patient. Precise. I stood up before he finished gathering his next excuse. Well, I said, if that's all, I'll get back to work. He tried to recover with another forced smile. Of course. And hey, don't stress too much. We're here to support you. Support. Right. I walked out of the conference room with a strange calm settling over me. Not relief. Not fear. Something else, something stronger. Resolve. The hallway felt colder than usual as I passed by the same people who had been whispering earlier. Some of them looked up at me with curiosity, maybe even guilt. They probably knew something was happening. But none of them knew how much I had already uncovered. I reached the exit door, pushed it open, and stepped outside into the fresh air. The sun was setting, painting the sky a deep shade of orange. It should have been peaceful, but all I could feel was a quiet fire building inside me. I stood there for a moment, taking a slow breath. Then, with no one around to hear it, I said the words that marked the real beginning of everything that followed. Now the real story begins. I didn't walk back into the office the next day with anger. I walked in with a plan. Because once someone shows you their motives, once their mask slips even a little, you start seeing everything differently. And now that I knew they were moving against me, I stopped reacting emotionally, and started collecting truth. Real, undeniable truth. For the next few days, I worked quietly. I kept my routine exactly the same, answered emails, joined meetings, fixed the issues nobody else could handle. On the outside, I looked calm, maybe even unaware. But every free moment, every break, every late-night hour when the office went silent, I was digging. Deep. The system logs were full of clues they thought they had erased. But logs don't erase. Not fully. Not the way I designed them. First, I found the timestamp mismatches. Actions done under my name at times I wasn't even in the building. Then the clone tokens, copies of my credentials created seconds apart, almost perfect duplicates. Almost. Then came the unauthorized approvals, hidden under layers of harmless system notes. Except, nothing about them was harmless. Each discovery felt like watching puzzle pieces fall into place. They tried to bury the evidence. But the system remembered. And now, so did I. Late one night, after everyone left, I went even deeper, into the archive logs that only a few people knew existed. That's where I found them, deleted messages. Messages they thought were gone forever. But the archives never lie. And what they showed made my stomach twist. One junior wrote, "Let's finish the setup tonight. He won't catch it." Another replied, "Once the switch is done, he's out." Then someone from upper management added, "Keep this quiet. We want a clean transition." Clean transition. That was the phrase that stuck with me. They wanted this to be smooth, silent, invisible. But not anymore. Once I collected enough proof, I began building a timeline. A private, encrypted one, far away from the company servers. I logged everything: dates, times, device fingerprints, login paths, off-hour activity, message histories, file changes, access spikes. Every single move they made to frame me was right there in front of me, step by step. And the more I looked at it, the more obvious it became: this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coordinated attempt to force me out. Still, I wanted a second opinion, someone who knew company policy better than anyone. So during lunch one afternoon, I met a colleague from compliance. Someone I trusted. Someone who'd seen similar things happen in other departments. I didn't show everything, just enough to get feedback. Just enough to see if I was imagining this. But the moment he scanned the logs, his whole expression changed. He looked up slowly and said, "This isn't random. This is planned. They're trying to replace you." Hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a different way. Not just betrayal. Not just disappointment. A threat. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought so." He leaned in, lowering his tone. "Be careful. And whatever you do, document everything." I already had. But his warning told me there was more ahead, more than I could see yet. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone under the office's dim lights and placed all the printed evidence into a sealed envelope. I added a note on the front: "If anything happens, deliver this." I handed it to someone I trusted outside the company, just in case. Because I knew the storm was coming. And I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. I didn't expect the meeting invite to arrive so fast. But when upper management wants you gone, they don't waste time. The subject line said it all: urgent review meeting, attendance required. No explanation. No details. Just a time, a room number, and a tone that told me they were ready to finish what they started. But they had no idea how much the ground had already shifted. I walked into that glass-walled meeting room with a calm they never expected to see on my face. 3 managers sat at the table, including my supervisor, Mark. Their folders were open, their laptops ready, their expressions tight with rehearsed confidence. They thought this would be simple. They thought I'd walk in confused, scared, unprepared. But today, I wasn't the one in danger. They were. Mark cleared his throat. "Thanks for coming on short notice," he said, acting like this was a friendly discussion. "We just want to go over a few concerns." I sat down slowly, keeping my voice steady. "Of course. Let's hear them." Another manager jumped in, eager to get things moving. "We've noticed a pattern of irregular activity under your account. Approvals you shouldn't have made. System changes outside protocol." I nodded patiently, almost encouragingly. They mistook my calm for weakness. "As a result," she continued, "we're considering temporary suspension while we investigate." She wasn't even done with her sentence when I reached into my folder. "I think," I said quietly, "you should see something first." The room went still. Mark frowned. "What is that?" "Your system logs," I told him. "The real ones." I placed the first stack of printed evidence on the table. The timestamps, the mismatched device fingerprints, the cloned credentials, they were all there, clear as daylight. They leaned forward reluctantly. One manager whispered, "This can't be right," but I wasn't done. These, I said as I laid down the second stack, are the Slack channel archives you thought were deleted. Mark's face lost its color so fast it was almost impressive. He recognized the channel name immediately. Transition Plan. I watched their eyes move across the lines of conversation, messages from juniors, quiet approvals from management, phrases like, "He's too tired to notice. Let's do it fast. Keep this quiet." The room's confidence broke in an instant. And finally, I said, placing the last set of documents on the table, "These are the attempts to bypass security using my name." Mark's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. "Where did you get all of this?" "The system keeps records you don't know about," I said. "Backups you can't erase. Logs you can't touch." For the first time since this nightmare began, I had the advantage. Not because I fought harder, but because truth, once uncovered, becomes a weapon sharper than anything else. The managers looked at one another, panicked whispers starting to form. Their perfect plan was falling apart before their eyes, piece by piece, layer by layer. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle. Then I delivered the final blow. I traced every unauthorized action, I said slowly, back to the devices that triggered them. Their heads snapped up. "And every single one," I continued, "belongs to someone in this room." The air froze. No one spoke. No one even moved. Their expressions, once confident and prepared, were now pale, tight, and full of fear. And for the first time since this began, I felt the shift. The tables had turned. The meeting room felt different the moment HR and compliance walked in. Their faces were serious, cautious, and most importantly, confused. Because they expected a simple case, an employee slipping up, maybe tired, maybe careless. But the evidence I dropped on the table told a very different story. Compliance sat beside me, flipping through the logs for a second time. HR scanned the Slack messages, their eyebrows rising higher with every line. The juniors, who had been whispering by the door, froze when they saw the printed messages in plain text. My boss, Mark, shifted in his chair, tapping his pen against the table like he wanted to break the silence before it swallowed him whole. Finally, HR spoke. "Can someone explain all of this?" I could have said a lot. I could have poured out weeks of anger and betrayal. I could have exposed every detail in one explosive moment. But true justice is quiet. So I simply said, "I'd like to walk everyone through what happened." And I did, one layer at a time. I started with the timestamp mismatches. The cloned credentials. The unauthorized approvals that appeared under my name even when I wasn't in the building. Compliance nodded as I spoke, checking my notes against the internal audit logs they had access to. Everything matched. Then I moved on to the deleted Slack messages, the hidden channel that was supposed to stay invisible. HR read the messages out loud, their voice growing tighter. "He's too tired to notice. Move fast. Clean transition." The juniors began to panic. One of them muttered, "We didn't mean, this wasn't supposed to," but their voices shook, and their words tumbled over each other with no direction. My boss finally tried to speak, raising his hands. "This is being taken out of context," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. It was all a miscommunication. We were discussing workflow changes. Compliance cut him off. "That's not what this looks like." Their tone was sharp, almost cold. I continued, explaining how the access logs traced the unauthorized activity back to specific devices. I didn't accuse anyone directly. I didn't raise my voice. I just laid out the truth, and let their own actions reveal themselves. When I finished, the room fell silent. The kind of silence that drops like a curtain after a drama finally exposes its villain. Compliance leaned back, exhaling. "This isn't accidental," they said. "This is coordinated. This violates multiple company policies." HR nodded slowly. "This could lead to serious consequences." My boss's face tightened. He threw a quick glare toward the juniors, as if blaming them suddenly made sense. "This is all a misunderstanding," he insisted. We were trying to support him, but his excuses fell apart the way lies always do when truth enters the room. I didn't need to add anything else. I just sat quietly, letting the weight of the evidence settle. Finally, management asked for a break. Everyone stepped into the hallway. Whispers erupted, fast, frantic, angry. Some people stared at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Others looked away out of embarrassment or guilt. I stayed seated, calm, steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like relief washing through me. They had tried to remove me quietly. But now the truth was loud enough for everyone to hear. A few minutes later, the door opened again. My boss stood there, pale and shaken. He swallowed hard before speaking. "We need to discuss next steps privately." And in that moment, I knew everything had shifted. The power was no longer in their hands. Some people think revenge has to be loud, explosive, dramatic, full of shouting and slammed doors. But the truth is, real revenge is quiet. It happens in the moments when the truth finally stands taller than the lies built to destroy you. When my boss asked for a private discussion, I followed him into a smaller meeting room. His hands were shaking as he closed the door behind us. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't in control. "I think we can work something out," he said, trying to sound calm. "If we clear this up internally, maybe we can avoid any complications." But I didn't need to threaten him. I didn't need to raise my voice. I already had everything I needed. And they knew it. Over the next 2 days, everything moved quickly, but not the way they had planned. HR called me first, apologizing for the misunderstanding. Compliance followed, confirming all accusations against me were formally removed. My name was cleared, cleanly, completely, publicly. Then came the next part. The part they had never expected. Compliance launched an internal investigation into the misuse of credentials, unauthorized access, and coordinated attempts to force an employee out. And unlike me, the people involved didn't have evidence to protect themselves. My boss was quietly reassigned to non-leadership duties, pending the investigation. It was a professional way of saying, "You're no longer trusted." The juniors, the ones I trained, were placed on immediate suspension. Not fired, but close enough that the entire department felt the shock. People whispered about it in the hallways, unsure what had just unfolded, but certain the ground had shifted. And me? I stayed calm through every meeting. Every apology. Every attempt to soften their guilt. Not because I wasn't hurt. Not because I had forgotten the betrayal. But because I chose clarity over rage. Dignity over noise. When HR offered me options, return to my role, transfer departments, or negotiate an exit, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not revenge that destroyed anyone. Not payback that left me bitter. I wanted a clean break. One I controlled. So I negotiated a severance package. A strong recommendation letter. A written acknowledgement that I had been falsely accused and fully cleared. And most importantly, a formal statement sent to the entire department correcting the narrative. The message landed in everyone's inbox that afternoon. A simple sentence stood out: "All previous concerns regarding my name have been proven inaccurate." People read it twice. Some apologized quietly. Others couldn't look me in the eye. That was enough. I didn't need anything more. On my last day, I packed my things slowly. No anger. No rush. Just a deep, calm relief that settled in my chest like I could finally breathe again. As I walked through the building one final time, I passed the same rooms where people once whispered about my supposed mistakes. Now those whispers had turned into questions, questions about the people who tried to replace me, and failed. I stepped outside into the sunlight, feeling the weight of the last few weeks lift off my shoulders. I didn't need a dramatic exit. I didn't need a final speech. The truth had spoken loudly enough. I paused at the edge of the parking lot, looked back at the building, and let the smallest smile appear. They wanted me gone, I whispered. Instead, they erased themselves. Some people say the hardest part of betrayal is the moment you discover it. But for me, the hardest part came after everything was over. When the building was behind me, the meetings were done, and the truth had finally spoken, I was left alone with one quiet question: how did it all come to this? I spent 12 years giving that company everything I had, my time, my energy, my patience, my late nights, and early mornings. I had always believed loyalty was a kind of promise, something that protected you when times got hard. But I learned something important: loyalty means nothing to people who only see numbers. And trust means nothing to people who only see opportunity. Still, as the days passed, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt lighter. I felt wiser. Because sometimes, stepping back gives you the clearest view of all. When I looked at the whole experience, something stood out: I never needed to shout. I never needed to break anything. I never needed dramatic revenge. All I needed was the truth. And the truth had been sitting inside those system logs the whole time, quiet, patient, waiting for the right moment to be heard. It reminded me that silence isn't weakness. Silence can be a powerful tool when you hold the facts in your hands. There were so many moments when I wanted to react, to defend myself, to confront the people whispering behind closed doors. But every time I stayed quiet, every time I listened instead of exploding, I became stronger. Silence gave me clarity. Clarity gave me direction. And direction brought justice. But beyond the strategy and evidence, the real lesson came from somewhere deeper. I realized I had ignored my own burnout for too long. I had convinced myself that being dependable meant being available all the time. I thought working harder would protect me from politics, jealousy, or hidden motives. It didn't. Sometimes the people you help the most are the first to turn their backs. Sometimes the people you trust with your workload will try to use it against you. Sometimes the people who praise you in public are the same ones plotting in private. And strangely, acknowledging that brought me peace, not bitterness. Because betrayal doesn't always need a battle. Sometimes exposure is enough. Sometimes the quiet reveal of truth does more damage than any loud confrontation could. Watching their plan fall apart, not because I fought, but because their own actions exposed them, taught me something I'll never forget: when someone builds their success on lies, the truth becomes their undoing. And walking away with my integrity intact, that was the real victory. Now, when I think about those nights staying late at the office, staring at logs full of secrets they thought were invisible, I don't feel defeated. I feel grateful. Because the system that recorded every action, every login, every message, it didn't lie. It didn't hide. It didn't take sides. It simply revealed what was already there. And that's the strange comfort in all of this. People can twist words. People can create stories. People can try to replace you quietly. But systems, logs, truth, they have a way of surviving even when everything else falls apart. So now, when I look back at everything that happened, I don't feel regret. I feel clarity. Strength. Closure. And I end this chapter of my life with one final thought, a reminder to myself and to anyone listening: they tried to replace me fast, but the system keeps every secret. And this time, the system chose the truth. If this story hit home, if you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or betrayed in silence, remember this: the truth always finds its voice. Even when people try to hide it. Thank you for watching. If you felt the justice, the suspense, the quiet revenge, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories just like this. And if you've lived through something similar, share your experience in the comments. Your voice might be the next chapter we tell. You're stronger than the ones who tried to replace you, and sometimes, truth is the greatest revenge.